The elevator doors opened, and the first thing I saw was the thin bar of light under my husband's office door. It was not closed all the way. 1 inch. Maybe 2. That was all it took to show me the truth. Vanessa Reed, Ethan's special assistant, was sitting on his lap with both arms around his neck. His hand was on her waist. Her mouth was on his. On the glass coffee table beside them sat the breakfast I had sent up that morning. A turkey sandwich, fresh fruit, and the black coffee Ethan always claimed only I knew how to make right. None of it had been touched. My fingers tightened around the car keys in my palm until the metal cut into my skin. My wedding ring pressed against my knuckle like a small cold warning. I did not kick the door open. I did not scream. I did not throw the keys at his face or ask Vanessa whether she preferred my coffee before or after sitting on my husband's lap. I simply stepped back, took my phone from my handbag, opened the camera, and aimed it through the crack in the door. The shutter sound was so soft it disappeared into the carpet. Ethan did not hear it. Vanessa did not hear it. I took 3 photos. 1 wide enough to show the office. 1 clear enough to show her face. 1 with the timestamp visible. Then I saved them to an encrypted folder, turned around and walked back to the elevator. As the numbers dropped floor by floor, I stared at my reflection in the polished doors. I looked calm. That was the part that would shock people later. Not the affair. Affairs were ordinary. Men like Ethan Shaw betrayed women every day and still managed to call themselves complicated, pressured, misunderstood. What shocked people was that I did not break. By the time I reached the lobby, a set of legal papers was already waiting in my attorney's printer. The divorce agreement, the demand letter, the copyright certificates, and the first page of the lawsuit that would make sure Ethan never again confused my silence with permission. 3 months earlier, if you had asked anyone in Chicago's design world about Ethan Shaw and Claire Bennett, they would have smiled and said we were a perfect match. I was 32, the founding architect of Bennett Studio, and I had 2 national design awards on my shelf before most of my classmates had paid off their student loans. I built quiet buildings with clean lines, warm materials, and spaces that made people feel as if they had permission to breathe. Ethan was 31, the CEO of Shaw Design Group, a legacy firm his late father William Shaw had left behind. Ethan was handsome in the polished, bright smile way that made donors write checks and reporters use words like visionary. He had 3 affiliated companies, a downtown tower with the Shaw name etched into the lobby wall, and a mother who still believed her son had inherited his father's brilliance instead of merely his company. He proposed first. Back then I thought that meant something. We met at a gala after I won the design commission for the Lakefront Museum of Contemporary Art. Ethan crossed the room with a glass of bourbon in his hand and said, "I looked at your drawings 3 times. Then I realized I didn't want to meet the architect. I wanted to meet the mind behind them. I was not used to being courted. My 20s had belonged to scale models, zoning meetings, concrete samples, client calls, and the kind of focus that made romantic drama feel like a badly designed room. Ethan was charming, decisive, and shamelessly persistent. For 6 months he sent coffee to my office, appeared at lectures I gave, asked questions sharp enough to make me think he had actually listened, and made me laugh when I had forgotten laughter could live inside exhaustion. I married him because I believed he saw me. The first year was sweet. The second year became strategic. Ethan began saying things like, "Our businesses should be aligned," and "Why are we paying rent on 2 offices when Shaw Tower has room?" And "You're brilliant at design, Claire, but you shouldn't have to deal with operations. Let my people handle the boring parts." I let Bennett Studio move into the 28th floor of Shaw Tower. At the time, I told myself it was practical. We were married. Our work overlapped. His firm had a larger administrative team. My studio could save on overhead and focus on design. Within 3 months, half my day belonged to Ethan's meetings, Ethan's clients, Ethan's investor dinners, Ethan's family events, Ethan's urgent favors. My own drawings started falling behind. Lucas Grant, my senior partner and the only person in my firm blunt enough to risk annoying me, finally shut the door to my office one afternoon and said, "Claire, he isn't supporting your firm. He's absorbing it." I laughed it off. Lucas did not. "He's moving your clients into his system," he said. "His accounting team handles your receivables. His assistants schedule your calls. His branding people keep inserting Shaw Design Group into your proposals. Look at the paper trail." That night, I went home and read the strategic partnership agreement Ethan had left on the kitchen island. I had been avoiding it because it was thick, boring, and introduced over dinner with the phrase, "just a formality." It was not a formality. By the third page, my stomach had gone cold. By the seventh, I understood what Lucas had been trying to tell me. The agreement assigned 6 of Bennett Studios' core projects, including the Lakefront Museum Commission, to Shaw Design Group for joint development, licensing, and long-term administrative management. Buried in the definitions section was language that would transfer future copyrights, derivative design rights, and client renewal fees to Shaw's corporate structure. The signature line at the end was blank. Ethan came into the kitchen while I was still reading. "Good, you found it," he said, loosening his tie. "Sign when you get a chance." "No rush." "No rush?" I asked. He smiled and kissed the top of my head. "Okay, a little rush. The board wants everything clean before the annual strategy launch. But it's us, Claire. Same family. Why let money leak between pockets?" I looked at the contract again. Those were not pockets. Those were ownership rights. "I'll read it carefully," I said. Something moved across his face, fast enough that a less suspicious woman might have missed it. Irritation. Then the smile returned. "Of course," he said. "Take your time." The next morning I called Maya Doyle. Maya had been in my graduating class at Northwestern before she went to law school and became the kind of intellectual property attorney who could make senior partners sweat without raising her voice. She met me at a small office near the river and spent 40 minutes reading the agreement with a red pen in her hand. When she finished, she looked up and said, "If you sign this, you become a subcontractor inside your own life." I sat very still. "Is it that bad?" "It's worse." She tapped the paper. "This isn't a partnership agreement. It's a transfer of leverage. Your copyrights, your renewals, your unpaid client fees, your staffing authority, even your ability to terminate certain Shaw personnel assigned to your projects. All of it bends toward him. What should I do? First, register every existing design, model, schematic, rendering, and source file in your own name if it is not already registered. Second, audit the ownership structure of Bennett Studio. Third, review every transaction routed through Shaw as a pass-through or administrative collection. Fourth." She stopped. "What?" Maya removed her glasses. "Pay attention to who your husband has been spending time with." I did not ask why. Some truths only need an outline. That night, while Ethan was in the shower, I walked into his dressing room and opened the small leather box where he kept cufflinks. Behind the cufflinks was a hotel key card. No name, just a room number and the logo of the Langham Chicago. I did not touch it. I photographed it, closed the box, and put everything back exactly as I had found it. When Ethan came home later that week and leaned against my shoulder saying, "I'm exhausted, baby. I negotiated that developer into giving your museum project a better package," I said thank you. When he added, "See, this is why we should merge the work. I can protect you better when everything is under one roof," I said nothing. In my mind, I repeated the room number on the key card until I could not forget it if I tried. The next day, I did not go to the contract signing Ethan had arranged. I asked my assistant to say an urgent client issue had come up and pushed the date back 1 week. Ethan called within 5 minutes. "What happened?" "There are a few details I want to review." "The client is ready." "I'm not." There was silence on the line. Then he said carefully, "Claire, don't overthink this. You're an artist. Let me handle the structure." "I'll call you later," I said, and hung up before he could turn concern into control. That afternoon, I drove to the Langham and sat in a cafe across the street. At 3:08 p.m., Ethan's black Mercedes pulled up to the front entrance. He stepped out first. Vanessa Reed followed. She was 26, an MBA with a perfect resume, and the kind of quiet smile that made older executives call her professional while younger women knew better. Ethan had hired her 6 months earlier as a special assistant. The day she started, he brought her to my office and said, "Vanessa will help me with the messy parts. Travel, contracts, vendor coordination, family schedules when I forget to breathe." I shook her hand. Her palm had been cool and dry. Now I watched her walk into the hotel half a step behind my husband, not like an employee, but like someone trained to look discreet while already belonging there. I did not take photos. Not that day. I drank my coffee, paid the bill, and left. On the way home, I called Maya. I may need to walk a longer road than I thought, I said. Her voice changed. Tell me what you need. Draft a divorce agreement. Premarital assets remain separate. Business ownership remains separate. No claim to Bennett Studio. No claim to my designs. I also need copies of every contract between Bennett Studio and Shaw Design Group for the last 3 years. Are you sure? Yes. Give me 10 days. No hurry, I said. He still thinks I'm asleep. The first thing I did after that call was build the vault. Every source file, every drawing, every client email, every signed proposal, every invoice, every revision note, every timestamp model, every internal approval, every copyright certificate already filed and every one still pending. My operations manager, Owen Ellis, helped me make 3 physical backups and 2 encrypted digital backups. Owen had been with me for 6 years and knew when not to ask questions. He only said, "Is this about Mr. Shaw?" I looked at the hard drive in my hand. "It's about protecting the work." Owen nodded. "Then we'll protect it." That same week, Ethan's family invited me to dinner. Invited was too generous a word. His mother, Diane Shaw, called and said, "Claire, darling, we're all gathering Thursday. Ethan needs you there. The family should speak with one voice before the launch." The family. That was what they called themselves when they wanted me to forget I was a person with a separate name. Dinner was held at Diane's house in Lake Forest, the old Shaw residence with polished floors, heavy curtains, and portraits of serious men in expensive frames. William Shaw had been dead for 2 years, but his presence still lived in the mahogany, the silver, and the way everyone lowered their voice when discussing the company he built. At the table were Diane, Ethan's uncle Richard, his cousin Natalie, and 2 older men who had known William back when Shaw Design Group was still respected for its ethics as much as its buildings. The conversation circled the agreement almost immediately. Diane lifted her teacup and said, "Claire, Ethan has been under tremendous pressure. Those cultural projects of yours are wonderful, but they need Shaw's reach to become profitable. Family should not make family beg for cooperation." Richard Shaw, broad-shouldered and red-faced from wine, leaned back and added, "Your studio has talent. Ethan has infrastructure. Don't let lawyers put walls where a marriage should have doors." Natalie smiled. "Honestly, Claire, Ethan has never embarrassed you publicly. A wife should know when to stand beside her husband." I held my teacup in both hands and let the warmth steady me. "You're right," I said. "A wife should know when to stand." They heard agreement. I heard warning. On the drive home, Ethan stared out the window for a long time. At a red light, he said, "You've been different lately." "Have I?" "You're hiding something." I turned and met his eyes. In the dim blue glow of the dashboard, he looked almost like the man I married. Almost. "No," I said. "I'm finally looking." The light changed. He looked down and typed a message. The screen reflected across his face. I did not ask who it was. I already knew. The pressure came 2 days later. Lucas called me from the studio, furious enough to skip hello. "The museum payment is being held." I sat up straight. "Why?" "New contact on their side. He says they need to re-review our qualification documents before releasing the next milestone payment." "That's absurd. We cleared qualification months ago." "I know. I called around." Lucas lowered his voice. The push came through Shaw. For 1 second, the room sharpened. My husband had not only tried to take my rights, he had started squeezing my cash flow. "How much is being held?" "Enough to hurt." The milestone payment represented payroll, consultants, fabrication deposits, and months of work. In the original Chinese books, the equivalent would have been a large 7-figure amount. In the American version of my life, it was the kind of payment that kept a boutique architecture firm from bending its knee to a larger one. "Do nothing publicly," I said. "Claire." "Lucas." "Not yet." After we hung up, I called Maya. "Add another category," I said. "Any money Shaw has collected or withheld on behalf of Bennett Studio. Dates, amounts, contract basis, client names, everything." "I'm already pulling it." "And prepare a demand letter for the museum payment." "Do you want it sent?" "Not yet." Maya paused. "You're waiting for a stage." I looked out my office window at the Chicago River, dark under a low sky. "Yes," I said. If he wants a public merger, he can have a public answer. The next person I met was Robert Hale. Robert was in his late 50s, one of William Shaw's earliest minority shareholders, and a man Ethan's family had quietly pushed out after William died. Robert still owned 7% of Shaw Design Group, but he had not been allowed near real decisions in years. We met at an old coffee house in Printers Row. He arrived early, wearing a navy overcoat and carrying a leather folder that looked older than Ethan's career. After the waitress left, I said, "Robert, I need to see Shaw's financial flows for the last 2 years." He did not pretend surprise. He simply looked at me for a long time and said, "So you noticed too?" I noticed enough. Robert turned his cup slowly on the table. "William trusted you. He said you had cleaner instincts than half his board. I'll tell you what I shouldn't. There are payments leaving Shaw that don't make sense. Consulting vendors, strategy retainers, market development fees. Smaller than the amounts that trigger board panic but regular. Too regular. Can you get records? Give me 3 days. Why help me?" His expression hardened. Because William Shaw did not spend 30 years building that company so his son and brother could gut it with pretty invoices. 3 days later, Robert handed me a flash drive. I opened it in Maya's office. There were 8 vendors. Different names. Similar addresses. Rotating managers. The payments ranged from approximately $440,000 to $1.8 million each, converted from the original RMB figures into the American scale of the story. Together, they totaled about $8.4 million. All 8 traced back to Vanessa Reed. Maya leaned over my shoulder and said one word. "Wow." Robert had written a note in the folder. "She is not just his assistant. She is the bag." By then, Maya had finished her own review. Shaw Design Group had collected or withheld 11 payments, owed to Bennett Studio under administrative pass-through arrangements. Some had been delayed. Some had been partially applied against vague internal service charges. Some had simply never been paid. Total, approximately $2.7 million. Maya tapped the spreadsheet. "You can sue today." "I know. Then why haven't we?" "Because he has one more chance to do exactly what I expect him to do." That chance arrived as an invitation. Ethan called me on a Monday and sounded cheerful for the first time in weeks. "Next Wednesday. Four Seasons Ballroom. Annual strategy launch. Shaw and Bennett's first joint public signing. The press list is good. Howard Greer is coming. Leonard Blake too. Mom will be there. Richard is handling the donor table." "You want me there," I said. "I need you there." "And the agreement?" "We sign on stage." He paused. "This is important, Claire." "Yes," I said. "It is." He laughed softly. "That was easier than I expected. I've had time to think. I knew you'd come around." After we hung up, I stood by the window and looked down at the moving city. "No, Ethan," I thought. "You never knew anything." The final photograph delivered itself to me the day before the launch. I had a client meeting that was moved at the last minute. Ethan had left his keys at home and mentioned he would spend the morning in his office reviewing urgent launch materials. On any other day, I might have sent a courier. That day, I took the keys myself. The elevator opened on the 28th floor. The corridor was quiet. His door was not fully closed. The light, the crack, the unfinished breakfast. Vanessa on his lap. That was the moment you already know. The camera, the silence, the elevator descending while the marriage ended without noise. I drove straight to Maya's office. She looked up when I walked in and set down her pen before I said a word. I handed her my phone. She looked at the 3 photos. Then she looked at me. "Tomorrow is the launch." "Tomorrow is the launch," I said. "Divorce agreement. Demand letter. Copyright certificates. Receivables claim. Vendor evidence. Do you want all of it in the packet?" "All of it. You understand what happens if you do this in front of cameras?" "Yes. There is no private door back after that." I took the phone from her hand. "Maya." He closed the private door when he turned my marriage into a signature trap. That night, Ethan came out of the shower in a robe, hair damp, smiling as if he had not been kissing another woman in his office hours earlier. "There you are," he said. "I thought we could order in. Tomorrow will be a long day." "Sure." He sat beside me and rested his head on my shoulder. "Don't be nervous tomorrow," he murmured. "Once we sign, everything gets easier. Maybe we take a vacation after. Somewhere warm. Where do you want to go?" He closed his eyes. "Anywhere you'll relax." I looked down at him. For the first time, I realized the man leaning on me felt less like my husband than a stranger using a familiar posture. The launch was held in the Grand Ballroom at the Four Seasons. By 1:30, the room was full. Shaw executives, Bennett employees, developers, lenders, consultants, industry journalists, family friends, Diane and Pearls, Richard with his political smile, Natalie whispering at the front table. Howard Greer, one of the largest commercial developers in the Midwest, sat in the first row. Leonard Blake, whose finance company was arranging a $44 million bridge facility for Shaw the following month, sat 2 seats away. Robert Hale sat near the aisle in the second row. He did not look at me when I entered. He did not need to. I wore a charcoal suit, my hair pulled back, no dramatic jewelry, no morning colors, no costume of revenge. I wanted the cameras to see a woman who had come prepared, not a woman who had come apart. Ethan met me near the stage and took my arm. "You look incredible," he whispered. "After the signing, I have a surprise for you." "I'm sure you do." Vanessa moved through the ballroom with a clipboard, perfect posture, perfect lipstick, perfect ignorance of how visible she was about to become. At exactly 2 o'clock, the host took the stage. There were speeches. There are always speeches before a disaster because powerful people like ceremonies to make their mistakes look official. Ethan spoke for 20 minutes. He talked about legacy, innovation, family, partnership, and the future of urban design. He talked about Shaw's reach and Bennett's creativity. He talked about one vision, one platform, one shared mission. Every time he said one, I thought mine. Then he turned to me with a smile. "Practice for cameras. I'd like to invite my wife, Claire Bennett, founder of Bennett Studio, to join me on stage as we formalize the partnership that will define the next generation of our work." Applause filled the room. I walked up. The agreement lay on the signing table, thick and waiting. Ethan signed first. His signature moved across the paper in one confident line. Then he handed me the pen. I took it. I looked at the contract. I did not sign. Instead, I turned to the host and said, "May I have the microphone?" The host blinked. "Of course." The room quieted with that instinct people have when something unscheduled appears in a scheduled place. Ethan leaned toward me, smile still fixed. "Claire." I ignored him. I faced the audience. "Thank you all for being here," I said. Today was supposed to be a signing ceremony. Before any signature is placed on that document, I need to correct the record. The room became very still. From the inside pocket of my jacket, I took a large brown legal envelope and placed it on the table. Ethan's hand moved toward it. I shifted it out of reach. "This envelope contains 5 things," I said. My voice did not shake. "The first is the divorce agreement I signed this morning." I pulled out the document and laid it on the table. Divorce settlement proposal appeared across the first page. A sound moved through the ballroom, not quite a gasp, not quite speech. Ethan's face changed. "Claire," he said under his breath, "don't do this." I pulled out the second stack. The second is proof of copyright registration for 117 original designs, schematics, models, renderings, and derivative works created by Bennett Studio and owned by me or my firm. They are not property of Shaw Design Group. The third stack. The third is a record of approximately $8.4 million in payments made by Shaw Design Group over the last 2 years to 8 shell vendors connected to Vanessa Reed. Vanessa froze near the front row. The fourth item was a photograph. I placed it face down first. Then I turned it over. Vanessa sitting on Ethan's lap. Ethan's hand at her waist. The timestamp. Yesterday, 10:17 a.m. Shaw Tower, 28th floor. Camera clicked. Then another. Then the room was full of them. Ethan went pale so quickly it looked medical. His hand found the edge of the table. The fifth item was already stamped and filed. "The fifth," I said, "is the demand letter sent through counsel 10 minutes ago seeking recovery of approximately $2.7 million in receivables owed to Bennett Studio and withheld by Shaw Design Group under administrative pass-through arrangements." I set the microphone down for one breath. Then I picked it up again. I will not sign the strategic partnership agreement. Bennett Studio withdraws from all proposed merger discussions immediately. Existing active projects involving Shaw will be handled strictly according to their contract terms. Any further communication should go through my attorney, Maya Doyle, who is seated in the front row. Ethan finally found his voice. Claire, listen to me. This is a misunderstanding. No. That photo is not what it looks like. It was taken yesterday at 10:17 a.m. in your office. Building security can confirm access. Your internal cameras can confirm location. Vanessa's eyes darted toward Ethan. He swallowed. She came on to me. For the first time, Vanessa moved. Her face went white, then hard. What did you just say? Ethan did not look at her. She forced the situation, he said, desperate now. I pushed her away. Vanessa laughed once. It was not a pretty sound. She stepped toward the press table and held up her phone. Since we're sharing records, she said, voice shaking with fury. I have 832 messages from Ethan Shaw over the last 6 months. I also have signed authorizations for every one of those vendor companies. His signature. His instructions. His payment approvals. Ethan turned on her. Vanessa. She smiled with hatred. What, Ethan? Did you think I'd go down alone? The room exploded. Reporters surged forward. Diane rose from her chair and sat back down as if her knees had failed. Richard whispered sharply to someone at his table. Howard Greer placed his glass on the table with a sound like judgment. Leonard Blake had already stepped into the hallway with his phone to his ear. I did not wait for the wreckage to settle. I walked down the stairs. Maya stood. She handed me a final filing packet. Courthouse, she asked. Courthouse, I said. Behind me, Ethan called my name. I did not turn around. The first chair to scrape loudly after I left belonged to Howard Greer. By evening, his company had issued notice suspending all current negotiations with Shaw Design Group. By morning, Leonard Blake's finance company had withdrawn the $44 million bridge facility. By the end of the week, 7 major partners had either paused or terminated active discussions. The headlines were merciless. Shaw Design Group launch implodes on stage. Architect wife exposes husband, assistant, and shell vendor payments. Bennett Studio founder withdraws from merger after public evidence drop. The first article reached 100,000 views before sunset. The second had photos. The third had Vanessa's name. By the third trading day, Shaw's private valuation had been marked down by analysts and lenders who once treated Ethan like a rising star. By the fourth day, vendors were calling for payment. By the fifth, Richard Shaw was blaming everyone except himself. Diane called me 14 times. I did not answer. Richard came to Bennett's studio and shouted in the hallway for 10 minutes. Owen stood at the door with 2 security guards and said nothing until Richard ran out of breath. As Richard left, he snapped, "Do not forget you are still a Shaw woman." Owen closed the door and turned to me. "Who's next?" "Vanessa," I said. I did not have to do much. Her own performance at the launch had created enough public pressure. Maya packaged the vendor evidence, payment authorizations, access logs, and Vanessa's statements, then sent them to the Economic Crimes Unit. The investigation moved faster than expected. Vanessa was taken in for questioning within a week on suspicion of embezzlement, fraud, and misappropriation of corporate funds. Then came the detail that made the story worse for everyone. Vanessa was married. Her husband, a nurse named Daniel Reed, appeared outside the courthouse holding their marriage certificate while reporters shouted questions at him. He looked stunned, humiliated, and younger than the grief on his face. "I didn't know," he said. "We have a mortgage. Almost $300,000 left on the house. I thought she was working late." No one needed him to cry. He simply stood there, and the silence around him did the work. He filed for divorce the next morning. Ethan did not come to the first divorce hearing. His attorney came instead and asked for division of marital property, including my 2 apartments, 40% of Bennett's studio, and half of what he called shared business growth. Maya almost smiled. She presented the evidence in order. The 2 apartments had been purchased before the marriage. Bennett Studio's ownership had been registered before the marriage. The 117 protected design works were documented in my name, or the studio's name before any Shaw assignment. The approximately $2.7 million in receivables owed to Bennett Studio had been withheld by Shaw, not contributed to the marriage. The judge read the documents for a long time. Then she looked at Ethan's attorney and said, "Do you still intend to argue that Mr. Shaw is entitled to ownership of the plaintiff's premarital architectural practice?" His attorney requested time to consult with his client. At the next hearing, Ethan came. He had lost weight. His jaw looked sharper. His eyes would not meet mine. The judgment was not theatrical. Real courts rarely are. That made it better. The marriage was dissolved. Each party retained separate premarital property. No spousal support. Shaw Design Group was ordered to return the unpaid receivables to Bennett Studio in scheduled installments, with interest penalties if late. Ethan's personal income claims were dismissed. When the judge finished reading, Ethan finally looked at me as if he expected one last private conversation. I was already standing. I left with Maya beside me and did not look back. I thought that was the end. It was not. 2 months later, Robert Hale called. "There is another layer," he said. I was in my new temporary office, marking revisions on a cultural center plan. Another layer to what? The shell vendors. Vanessa was the visible link, but 6 of the 8 vendors routed money onward. Final beneficiary was a company controlled by Richard Shaw. My pencil stopped. How much? At least $5.6 million. Can you prove it? Yes. Why didn't you move before? Robert was silent for a moment. Because one old shareholder could not fight Diane, Richard, and Ethan alone. But now the room knows the house is on fire. What do you want? To take William's company back from the people who have been eating it. I leaned back in my chair. What do you need from me? Not your revenge, Robert said. Your credibility. The people who still trust the Shaw name do not trust the Shaws anymore. They trust you. Over the next week, I sat with 5 minority shareholders. Some had known William. Some had worked under him. Some had stayed quiet because they thought silence was safer than being pushed out like Robert. To each of them I said the same thing. When William Shaw was alive, this company did not operate this way. All 5 agreed. 10 days later, an emergency shareholder meeting was called. The agenda was simple. Forensic audit of Richard Shaw's interim authority, review of major transfers and removal proceedings. Richard arrived furious. He tried charm first, then nostalgia, then threats, then family. One by one, the minority shareholders cast their votes. When the final vote was counted, Robert Hale stood and said, "William Shaw's company comes home today." Richard stormed toward the exit. He did not make it through the door. 2 investigators stopped him in the hallway. By then, the payment trail had reached his investment entity. The shell vendors were no longer gossip. They were evidence. Diane collapsed into a chair. In that moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Not because she had been kind to me. She had not. But because she finally understood that the brother she trusted had eaten through her son, her husband's legacy, and the company she thought she was protecting. That night Diane called me. I answered. For a long time neither of us spoke. Then she said very quietly, "Claire, Ethan wronged you." "Yes. I wronged you too." I did not answer. "Will you see him?" "No. He is not well. He has doctors. He keeps saying he wants to explain." "He has been explaining for years," I said. "Mostly to himself." Diane breathed in sharply but did not argue. "Take care of your health," I said. Then I hung up. Owen came into my office a few minutes later with tea. "Are you going to see him?" he asked. "No." "Good." I smiled for the first time that day. "Owen, order a new sign for the studio." "What should it say?" "Bennett Studio." "That part one no." "And under it, independent architecture." He grinned. "That I like." The next year belonged to rebuilding. The Lakefront Museum project resumed after the client formally apologized for withholding the milestone payment under outside pressure. The payment was released in full, and 2 satellite gallery commissions followed. Howard Greer signed Bennett Studio to a 3-year design agreement for his commercial properties. Leonard Blake introduced us to 2 major cultural tourism projects in other states. Robert sold part of his Shaw minority position after the restructuring and invested a modest amount into Bennett's studio because he said, "I'd rather own a small piece of something clean than a large piece of something rotting." We moved out of Shaw Tower before Christmas. The new studio stood on the west side, a 3-story brick building with tall windows, raw timber beams, and enough space for people to breathe. On moving day, Owen stood beside me as the new sign went up. Bennett's Studio. Independent architecture. Below it, the city moved on as if nothing had happened, which was both cruel and comforting. "What do you want to do with the old Shaw sign from our floor?" Owen asked. "Burn it." He laughed. "I was hoping you'd say that." I did not attend Ethan's criminal proceedings. I heard the results from Maya. Vanessa took a deal. Richard fought longer, then folded when the money trail tightened. Ethan was added as a defendant in the civil recovery actions and compelled to repay approximately $2.1 million in personal withdrawals disguised as loans from Shaw. 2 of his properties were seized. He lost his executive authority. He lost the network he thought belonged to him. What he kept was his mother's old house and the long quiet days that follow men who used to mistake attention for respect. I did not celebrate. Celebration belongs to victories that cost less. What I felt was cleaner. Space. Years passed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. By the 5th spring I was 40. Bennett's studio had grown from 1 building to 3. The Lakefront Museum won a National Architecture Award. I was named one of the most influential architects of the year. I did not remarry. I did not swear off marriage either. I simply stopped arranging my life around the fear of being alone. That afternoon, I was coming back from a design review when I drove through an old neighborhood near Lincoln Park. There was a cafe there I used to visit in college. Somehow, after all those years, it was still open. The sycamore tree outside had grown wider. The window frames had been repainted green. I parked and went in. The place was nearly empty. I ordered an Americano and sat by the window. Sunlight fell across the table in a soft square. I had almost finished my coffee when someone said my name. "Claire." I looked up. Ethan Shaw stood beside my table. For a moment, I did not feel anything at all. Then I noticed the details. He was thinner. Much thinner. His expensive sharpness was gone, replaced by a beige coat that had been worn too many seasons. His hair was shorter and threaded faintly with gray. There were shadows under his eyes. In one hand he held a canvas grocery bag. A bunch of carrots stuck out of the top. He looked less like the man who had stood under ballroom lights waiting for my signature, and more like a man who had learned how heavy ordinary errands could be. "Ethan," I said, "may I sit?" I could have said no. Instead I nodded once. He sat carefully, as if afraid sudden movement would make me leave. "You look well," he said. "I am. I heard about the museum award." "Yes. It was beautiful. I saw the photos." "Thank you." Silence settled between us. He looked at his hands. "I waited 5 years," he said. I looked at him. "For what?" "For a chance to explain." There it was. Not apology. Explanation. He raised his eyes. They were red already. "That day at the launch," he said. "If you had let me explain even once, maybe we wouldn't have ended like that." I picked up my coffee and took a slow sip. "Ethan, I was wrong about Vanessa. I admit that. But the photo, Claire, it wasn't the whole story." "No," I said. "It wasn't." Hope moved across his face. I set the cup down. "The photo was not why I left you. It was simply the last page." He stared at me. I continued quietly. "I left because you tried to make me sign away my copyrights. I left because you used Shaw to pressure my museum client and hold my payment hostage. I left because you routed my firm's money through your company and called it administration. I left because you watched your family pressure me at dinner and said nothing. I left because I found the hotel key card before I found Vanessa in your lap." His mouth trembled. "Claire, you keep trying to explain one photo because one photo makes you feel like one mistake ruined your life. That is not what happened." He looked down. "What happened then? You built a life where my trust was an asset you could borrow against. Then you were shocked when the lender called it due." His eyes filled. "I waited for you," he whispered. "No," I said. You waited for a version of me who would make you feel less guilty. He flinched. I stood and took a few bills from my wallet, placing them on the table. Coffee's on me. Claire, please. I paused near the door and looked back once. Take care of your mother, Ethan. Then I left. Behind me, the bell over the cafe door rang once, small and final. I drove back to the west side as the sun began to lower, turning the windows of the city gold. When I pulled into the studio lot, the sign glowed quietly in the evening light. Bennett Studio, Independent Architecture. Owen was waiting near the entrance with a folder under one arm. Singapore emailed, he said. They want you there next week to discuss the waterfront library project. Schedule it. Robert called too. His grandson's first birthday is next month. He said you are not allowed to miss it. Put it on the calendar and send a gift. Owen studied my face. Everything okay? I looked up at the windows where my team was still working, one lamp after another turning on as the sky darkened. Yes, I said. Everything is moving. In my office, I hung my coat and opened the bottom drawer. At the back was an old phone. Inside it was the encrypted folder. Inside that folder were 3 photographs from a cracked office door, taken 5 years earlier. I held the phone for a moment. Then I put it back without opening it. Evidence should be kept. Pain does not need to be replayed. I closed the drawer, opened my laptop and pulled up the plans for a public library. A building full of light, glass, warm wood, reading rooms, wide stairs, and a central atrium designed to make strangers feel welcome without asking who they belong to. The screen glowed. Outside, night settled over the city. I picked up my pencil. One clean line. Then another. Forward.